I'm a slow burn, crawl around the road, work something from the other side, clawing at the known world. Crumble boy your cookies with the autumn incarnate heel city. By the time your eyes adjusted to the darkness, parts uncharted, always find the corners cozy. You can send your fastest riders, I return the horses lonely. Controller, the locals only note the Lucky Charms and army jacket. When you're ready's in the heart of Darby Dragons, I know. No solicitors, waves away as visitors. From 10 minutes in front of a tainted energy signature. Still bullseye and womp raps from the scenic route. Sugar in his coffee like a seance in a TV room. The cheek swab came back half amazing. Half of what he make end up on his lab apron. It's quieter than most, I'm mostly mastering the science of keeping one's composure while the limbic system's lighting up. Some try to combat any kind of odd force trying to make contact. Nah, let it in, let it in. Let it in, let it in. Some try to stonewall any kind of woo-woo trying to make a phone call. Nah, let it in, let it in. 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 Bring around a revenant, let it in. Said he wasn't ready yet, he never left the Etch-a-Sketch. Stuck around for more than just a parlor trick or flickering fluorescence. Had a couple still to visit with a million pressing questions like, where were you the night of? What are you traversing Earth in spite of? How are you adjusting to the triumph? I'm asking for a friend who caught a loss and never surfaced. Simply curled up in his cubby, shutting down the central nervous. Look, float up in an urgent care, a checkerboard of blurry squares. Flowers in the lobby shrivel back into the earth and where? Humans in the lobby holding crosses up. I understand the caution, but some of you just want to see the coffin jump. Until the coffin jump, then it's what I call a pump. Didn't even get to where he coughing blood and talking tongues. Not to mention once you hassle the horde, it doesn't matter how much furniture you stack at the door. Yeah. Some try to combat any kind of odd force trying to make contact. Nah, let it in, let it in. Let it in, let it in. Some try to stonewall any kind of woo-woo trying to make a phone call. Nah, let it in, let it in. 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 Hand-drawn map, crossover, cross-back. Calling from the flight deck, I collect dog tags. Tall grass, asphalt, a sore flat. Soul jazz like an alphabet to soul bass. Ready to the basic anatomy of a death stare. Passing through the old Manhattan, ectoplasm everywhere. Pack a second teddy bear, I'm headed for the panic. Take a second for some bacon, take his head off when in transit. I don't coexist, I don't exist. Even JC missing with the loaves and fish. You feel dementia getting closer like the devil getting over. Now his antennas are roaming for Radio Terra Nova going, shh, shh, sir, I think we've got a signal. It's fuzzy, but they're playing one that wasn't from the hymnal. I'm a faint scent of sulfur, I'm the source of the ooze. I'm security tape of a glowing orb in the room. What's up?
All right, what's up, guys? It is Tuesday, which means another Note to File Live. What's up, boys?
How's it going, Brad? Hey, Dan. Hey, Ronak?
Hey, Ronak, yes.
Ronak. Nice to meet you, Ronak.
Nice to meet you. How's it going, Brad? Long time.
I know, man. I was just telling Dan it's been a while since we've talked. So
we just ended our live stream and said, hey, you know what? Rather than like try to compete with Brad, let's just continue the conversation on his.
I like it.
Ronik's been like, honestly, Ronik's been keeping us busy. So myself and Chris partnered with Ronik on Patient Ace, which is a recruitment tool that sites can use. And I was one of the early pilot sites for it because I'm the owner. It's like Hair Club for Men. But I also got good feedback from Monica and Judy who've used it. And then some of our other sites, like the ability to meter your leads, like, hey, Ronik, let's crank it up. Okay, we're busy. Let's turn it down. Has been amazing. Like, I have not had to hire an admin yet. We're really like pushing to where we might need an admin who will become a CRC. But I think once you figure out, like, I guess we begin with the end in mind. I have a prediction that 10 years from now, sites are getting patient leads passively. Like, they don't have to do anything. People are just in their calendar showing up. I think this is a step to get us there.
So
That's it.
tell me. Yeah, tell me about it. What does Patient Ace do? Is it just digital? Not, I mean, I want to say it like just digital, but it's digital marketing essentially.
Yeah, I would basically say it's a friction reduction mechanism. If I had to come up with
We
a
need
way to
more.
describe it, but basically it combines um, advertising and follow up. So patient recruitment, advertising on social media, and then following up once you get the leads, and just makes it easy for the site owner to respond in a way that's easy for the site owner, really. So I don't want to say site centric because that's everybody says site centric, everybody says patient centric, but um, take out the friction, make it easier.
So you guys work directly with sites versus
Yeah.
necessarily like sponsor campaigns, and I mean, even that is great because I feel like there's some good companies out there, but almost none seem to want to work directly with sites anymore.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough because working with individual sites, you're doing 80% of the work versus working with a sponsor. But it's not easy, but it's needed.
And let's face it, like, here's why. Like, we're all site owners. Ronick himself became a site owner to learn the process better, and why not? We need more sites. Site owners are not perfect. Like, we're not angels.
How dare you?
We're not Mother Teresa. We're actually not very good customers for tech companies. Like, even if it's free, like, let that sink in for a second. Even if the product or service is free, we are bad customers. Like, so it's very tough for a vendor to build a business model around that.
That's a really good point. I think about that a lot too, because I've had this conversation with somebody on my team who's relatively new, but like we have access to a lot of cool shit, and a lot of it is free. But getting it implemented, also working with like all the different, sponsor side, patient side, whatever, is more challenging because it sounds. I mean, you make it sound like, oh, it's free, it should be easy, right? Like, why aren't you using it? Well, sponsors shoot you down when you try to bring your tool to the table, or you're just busy with your head down trying to enroll patients. So I've seen and Ronick, I think you came down to Oklahoma City, and I love seeing that this is like we're seeing more of these vendors get out to sites and try to make ourselves available, to be a part of making it better. Because you're right. I mean, I think that's something sites struggle with. I don't even think it's on purpose, right? It's just the nature of sites.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way we started. Really, if you remember, I kind of invited myself over to the site. We were kind of exploring the site acquisition and the whole concept of making the industry more efficient by acquiring sites, and as part of that process, we wanted to kind of do a test case and say, okay, how can we use digital marketing to make trials more efficient? And in that process, um, the big thing that came out was it's not the leads necessarily that is the issue. It's the follow up that's more of the challenge. And so, through that process, we kind of tweaked and came up with a solution of, let's let's make sure that we're following up within a minute, even if it's just a simple text message saying, "Hey, we have your information. Somebody will reach out." And just by doing that, we saw a big difference. And then organically, people came to us, and like Dan mentioned, and it's kind of grown from there, really. But it's been interesting. But from a site perspective, it's really tough to you're wearing 50 hats, and it's like, well, a vendor is asking a site, hey, why don't you sign into my platform and do this thing, and it's like, well, I don't even know the password, and I don't even know I haven't been in front of a computer for the past 4 hours, right? So how do you solve that problem, and make it easier? And so we've kind of done that with, hey, everybody has their phone with them. You can use text messages to follow up. You can use an app where you don't have to sign in 50 times and basically like it's not like the Great Wall of China that you have to log in and do all that. You can just do it in between site visits, or sorry, patient visits, if you're a coordinator. And so it's just, the theme is reducing friction in all ways possible.
I mean, it shouldn't be that hard, right? And then to your point, though, like, you've got, if we're running 70 studies, which is not an exaggeration, like how many different central campaign companies are you working with? And they all have their own, quirks. They all have their own portals, obviously.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I really don't know why this can't be more simplified. Because of your point too, like, what's up?
Do you have an admin because this was our conversation on the last live stream that got cut off. I'm like really close to like wanting to hire an admin just to schedule and follow up. How does that work with you?
So it's funny. We started, I brought somebody in on a specific study just to do that because we were getting so many leads. And the sponsor was like, we kept up with them really well for a while, and then we didn't because we were also cycling back through seeing all the patients we had already brought in, and pretty soon it just became too much to handle. But I mean, to Ronik's point, like when we responded in that, like, and they were actually doing warm handoffs, which made it even easier. There was no gap. But when you took that call, that patient was going to show up almost 100% of the time. But for every hour you leave, they're gone, man. They're a little bit further out the door. So I brought somebody in just for that study. It was worth it. It worked perfectly. We made every phone call immediately, brought every patient in. We got busy again. She moved to a regulatory role. So now I'm going back to the idea of having somebody come in to do admin because coordinators are now busy too with all their studies, and even busy enough to where it's tough. We got a study, and someone Dan, I'll say it's one in health, but we got like 14 leads over the weekend. So my coordinator's got to show up on top of their normal visits and follow up on 14 leads.
Yeah, one in health is amazing.
So that might make a really good entry-level position. So someone can come in and be an admin to do that, but there's an intention to bring them up into being a CRC later.
That was my idea too. Like, and it's not mine. I mean, but with Yuma clinical trials, like groom them to be a CRC. But if they don't, you're not hiring for the CRC, you're hiring for the potential. And if they end up not being CRC potential, you got a permanent admin. That's the downside.
That's fair. But my question is this: how do you have one admin taking inbound calls for 40 protocols?
You have too many. I only have like 7.
All
right. You gotta probably hire multiple admins.
I was going to say, at some point you've almost got like a small call center, but at that point it's almost like, well, your coordinators know it better than anyone. So do you just distribute to your coordinators? But then that becomes challenging because they're running 3 or 4 studies a piece. Yeah. So I get a little chicken or the egg, right?
Would your coordinators take away from more visits? Like, could your coordinators do more visits with your existing team if they didn't have to do this? That's like what it boils down to.
I mean, look at healthcare, Brad. Perfect example. The value of your employees' times are based off of their skills and their abilities to do things. Like your admin may not be able to do a CRC visit, but they can take, I don't want to say like, it's very, very important, but it might not be as skilled as a CRC. Which means if you take that away, then you'd have more bandwidth for your CRCs.
And frankly, it's a different skill set than what some CRCs have. I mean, some CRCs aren't great on the phone. That's your first point of contact, and that can also really set the tone, for whether the patient's even going to walk through the door or not.
I've always advocated like hiring generalists, so coordinators that are good on the phone, but are also good on the EDC and are also good at dealing with doctors and also good at like generalists, right? But the problem is, well, it's not a problem. It's a good blessing to have. But if they're good at everything, you can argue yourself out of, hey, I don't need an admin. They're good at this. But then it is like you're watching Creo. I use Creo. Like we spent 2 hours following up on leads. We could add another screening. You know, it becomes math at some point, and I'm almost there. But I think with 70 studies,
Yeah,
you
that
got
that
another
sounds like
set of challenges.
that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, it seems like 1 or 2 patients, 1 or 2 enrollments would cover that easily.
Yeah, that's
You know,
generally
it
true. Yeah.
doesn't take much.
Yeah. Then it just becomes philosophical. Like, does Brad want to deal with more people? Do I want to deal with
Well, and
more?
that's a legit question. I think,
Mm.
like, I've always came in with the intention of being like fairly flat, and not becoming, crazy siloed with departments. But the longer it goes and the bigger it gets, the more I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is why big companies are structured that way, because it makes sense in some ways. But you don't want to lose that part of your culture either, where it's like everybody. There aren't true silos like there are across so many parts of the industry that we see. Like, how do you balance like the good parts of whatever you want to call it, corporate America, with like the culture that you're building at your site? And that's kind of what I'm like existentially struggling with, I think.
How many employees do you have now, Brett?
14.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read this, but there's a number. There's a number, and it's much higher than 14, where you could grow up to that number and still have an efficient organization and still
Yep.
have that same.
I think
I
it's
think it was in
50.
the 30s or 40s. Yeah, 50
I
maybe.
think it's 50 because I've heard that too. Because once it's 50, it just turns into a giant cluster.
Yeah.
You have to have organization
So
around it.
I think you have some bandwidth to do that.
Yeah, and that's probably true. And a lot of this is probably more about me than it is about the concept. You know what I mean? Like me being able to carry it out
Yeah, sure.
in a very efficient way. But yeah, you're probably right. And maybe there comes a point where it's like, do you really need to get bigger? Do you want to get bigger? I mean, 50 of them already sounds like a nightmare to me. I might be going
14,
back. I might be going back to
14
you.
sound like a nightmare to me. I mean, I think we can get to 14. 50, I can't even fathom right now. We're at 7. We're at 5, 7 if you include me and Jaime. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, who wants to deal? You do lose efficiencies the more people you bring on, and people can hide easier. So then the culture slowly becomes, well, this person's gonna do it. It's just not my responsibility. And it doesn't happen like overnight. It just starts slowly going downhill to where, like, a year later you're like, what the hell did I build? Like, we built this. Then you gotta get a management layer, which I suck at. And I'm sure Brad doesn't enjoy that either. I mean,
Yeah, no.
it becomes more complex. So there's some sake of like keeping things simple that I hold on to, like it's a romantic notion. But can you have growth and simplicity at the same time? I don't know.
I think you can, and obviously this is more theoretical, but I think there are people that have done it. So I think clinical research and protocols inherently are very non-scalable. They're for each study you do, there's a fixed cost of learning the protocol, training, working with the sponsor, working with the CRO. But then I think once you get a study, then enrolling the next patient is less work than starting a new study. And so I think at that point it becomes a question of what studies do you take on. Take on the studies where you can recruit more and focus on those. That's more scalable to get patient number or subject number 25 rather than subject number 1 for another study. And then if you're in a position where you can pick and choose, that's probably easier to scale than let's get 20 more studies, or let's hire 20 more people. No, let's be more selective about the studies that we do get, and only pick the ones that are a perfect fit for us and what we can do.
And I think that is the ideal. We've talked about, like, we know, Nelson Ruttrick's a good example at Adams Clinical, where they really hammer in, like, yeah, we do 5 trials or whatever at a time, but we absolutely knock them out of the park. I love that. I think that's smart. I think you don't know what you don't know in the beginning, especially, and even that applies for each new therapeutic area. So I feel like we're like each new TA we get into, it's like, okay, well, let's go broad. Let's learn a few lessons. Let's get knocked around, and then we can start to narrow down on what we know are going to be the good opportunities. Because I'm with you. I'd rather have 25 patients in a study than one patient in 25 studies. It just makes a lot more sense, but it's easier said than done, I think, in some regard.
So do you know how sometimes when you're working on a study and then all of a sudden you don't know why, but you're passed off to another CRO team member? Like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm passing this off to so-and-so.
Oh, yeah.
It's because CROs are very good at this. They have specialized teams for different stages of the trial. So they'll have a team that is specialized in the startup of the trial, and then the actually recruitment phase. And then you go into maintenance phase, and then you go into closeout phase. So when you transition over to that, you're actively recruiting, and it's a really, really high energy, high volume work, all the way to maintenance, where enrollment has stopped. You know a fixed cost. You know how many patients are there. You have an approximation of how much revenue you're going to earn. You shift that over to a team that is a little less specialized, that can just maintain, and then you focus your team who can do the really hard recruitment work onto the next trial. So Brad, if you're hitting 70 trials, that may be one way that you can organize this, is you have like a task force dedicated with high specialty needs for getting the patients on, versus a maintenance team that can just kind of run a trial while you're not enrolling.
Yeah, and I've actually thought about this. And so this is something, I didn't get too down the road with, but we've got an employee, for example, who he's amazing at having consent discussions with patients. And, he works in like a fairly narrow therapeutic area right now. But somebody brought up the idea of what if he were doing the consent for mini studies instead of being committed to a therapeutic area? And that's when you start to get into, I think, the idea you're hinting at, which is hey man, these people are really good at this thing. Let's roll him out. Let's let him have consent conversations. He's great connecting with patients. I know that doesn't seem like rocket science, but for some reason that just never occurred to me. Organizing my people that way never really occurred to me. But I think it actually could make a lot of sense. You've got your recruitment team, and they're not, instead of you've got oncology people and you've got GI people and you've got, whatever the case is. So I guess there's almost an infinite way to stack your employees or sort of group them. But I like that idea.
Yeah, most of the time when you get into the big organizations, you're going to do two separations, one by indication, like oncology, GI. And then within those, you're going to have little pods of teams. You're going to have the startup initiation team, the maintenance team, and the closeout team. And then there, like you said, there's an infinite way to do it, but odds are you have to scale it up as you grow. You're not going to be able to have this giant corporate structure around 14 people. You have to kind of build your way into it.
All 14 of my people are C-suite.
There is something to be said about ownership of a task, though, and one of the arguments against hiring an admin is if they're not going to be the ones actually seeing the patient. Number one, they're just going to go crazy scheduling random people, regardless of screen fail status or not, just to show good metrics, because they're going to be measured on some metrics. The other one is, one thing I've noticed, when our staff, this is something I just thought about now, when one of our staff does the pre-screening, they make sure they're there early, because they're the ones that talk to the patient. So if the patient say, hey, I'll be there at 8, cool. Lana's going to make sure she's there at 7:45, because she now has ownership over that. If she's late, that patient say, hey, you told me to come. Then everyone kind of sees, hey, that was you that scheduled that one. So I fear losing some of that, but the ROI is probably better to still lose it. I don't know. It gets complex. It's more complex than just the superficial stuff.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you, and that's the problem I've had. I think philosophically is, because I think it's a lot to add. And again, this is unique in that we've got so many, but the coordinator knows nothing is worse than having 3 people show up who should never have come to your door in the first place. And And to your point, if you've got incentives that are aligned kind of all over the place, and there's that accountability doesn't carry along, then you're creating bigger problems and more of a pain in the ass for everybody. I don't know. Maybe the key is just to stay small enough, right? Like, I'm beginning to appreciate not trying to like take over the world and just keep it manageable, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree, Dan. Keeping that skin in the game, keeping those CRCs accountable, making sure that if they mess up, it's on them. It's not on someone else.
I've seen it. As you
Every
guys were
time.
talking, I'm thinking, okay, well, every time this person scheduled it, she's the first one there. And then when someone else scheduled it, she didn't mind being 5 minutes late. You know, and it's like, it's not a bad thing. It's just, I think, how humans operate as far as taking ownership of certain things, especially when it comes to like social interactions, and scheduling and meeting a patient's definitely a social interaction. We are governed by those laws of human nature.
It's true. And I even had patients be like, hey, but I talked to so-and-so on the phone for an hour. Who are you?
Exactly.
Who are you, CRC? And you're like, well, all right. Now we're like,
and then the patients start to see like things like, oh, well, coordinator might mention, well, that person should have told you this on the phone instead. And now you got like internal arguments in front of patients. These are like the potential backfire that you need a strong management team, I think, which is kind of what I don't want to do.
I think this is a great comment from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. CRCs are excellent at and hired for running a study excellently and collecting data immaculately, but aren't necessarily hired for an it factor or the ability to connect, convey information well, anticipate, and allay fears and questions. I don't think it has to be that way, but yes, I understand what you're saying. It's important early on to have pre-screen and qualification role early in the small branching before scaling up, the change that creates a significant boost. So I don't disagree. Now, I think, there are plenty of coordinators that do have that it factor. And maybe that's more of, to Dan's point, like a matter of managing it better for me and not just being like, well, you're just a normal coordinator. Like, no, your strength is actually this. So we need to make sure that we, use your strengths, man. Lean into the strengths that your team has. I've been like you, Dan. I think you want everybody to be generalists, but I'm starting to appreciate the strengths and weaknesses and be like, man, let's lean into the individual strengths of those coordinators. We talked about it at SOS, but doing like the personality tests, which, like, if I get a job, if I apply for a job and there's a personality test, I'm already fucking pissed off. I don't want to do it. But having my coordinators do a personality test, I think, was super insightful. And you do really get to see some things that maybe weren't immediately obvious that you're like, oh, well, maybe we should be utilizing them differently. And that's on us, as side owners.
So I wonder, and I've had this before, where coordinators, they pretty much quit from the site. They leave because it's too flat. There's no ladder to climb. There's no trajectory. It's just you're either a coordinator or you're not a coordinator. And that gets boring on a professional level. I really like the idea of having some kind of a generalist to learn everything. I think that might be what Sarah was talking about. And then working your way into specializations as a higher career ladder to move up toward. Maybe that's something that you can do as your organization grows. And that's the other question, Brad, is, at what point are you just larger than you're comfortable being? Like, it kind of just defies the whole reason why you did this.
Great question. I ask myself that all the time, especially like when new opportunities keep coming and you're like, okay, at what point do I not want to do this? Not this, but like, at that scale.
Send them over to
okay,
Dan.
I'll shoot them over to you guys. But to Ronik's point, like, this isn't incredibly scalable. It's just growth, right? So it's like there's only a certain amount that you can do more with less, and I don't think the margin is that big. Again, maybe you can have a small team that does regulatory. Either way, you need a body. You need bodies seeing patients. So then again, it becomes a growth, and as that becomes harder and harder to manage, the bigger you get. And hell, I'd go work for a huge company if that's what I wanted, but that's not what I wanted. Also, that's why I really like the idea of there being more small sites versus the hilarious idea of decentralized clinical trials, which are actually more centralized. There's more power in the hands of less people running those studies. And truly, we're already pretty distributed and decentralized, but I think we need more, more local community sites.
Yeah, that's true decentralization. I'm so glad we stopped hearing that as much. That's like a 2023 thing.
They're waiting on the next one to drop.
Yeah, the next one's AI something, but that's fine. They could have their buzzwords.
Yeah, we'll see.
Growth
See what the
companies,
next
though, like so to Dr. Fox's point on boring, that's true, and I think as long as you're part of a growing company, even if the organization's flat, you're still growing. So there's opportunity within that flat organization. I think the boring comes from being too big, no more growth. You're just maintaining, right? And then you've streamlined to maximize efficiency. I think that's where boring comes in. I know a lot of coordinators that haven't left because it's not boring. And that's one of the reasons why I don't want to add them in, because patient stories. I mean, one of our CRC said that's their favorite part, is calling patients and learning about their stories, what they got to say. I mean, that takes away. If I outsource that or insource that to someone internally, at least one CRC who's vocal about it is going to lose some of the fun, interesting aspects of her job. So I don't know. This stuff's complicated, man. At the end of the day, it boils down to the site owner. Do what you want to do, but there's people that work underneath you that may not agree.
Yeah, and to your point, I don't think there's a wrong or right way necessarily. And just like you pointed out, I mean, some people like the spectrum of things, and some people want to do the one thing really good. And again, I think that's up to us or the site owner, or manager, whatever the case is, to recognize that and then adjust accordingly, or not. Depending on how you decide to run your business. I don't know.
Yeah, and
Dan, I got a question for you. I'm sorry, Ranak. I'll just if you wanted to keep your team motivated about growth of the company, what would you share with them, and what wouldn't you share with them?
I share my plans with them. Like, hey, I plan, and I also look for their feedback. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, at one point, I was playing around with the idea of I'll have a team pulmonology and team CNS. But the feedback is from them is, hey, only if we get like really big, like even bigger than Brad's site, which would be doubling our staff. But I do share, like, this is our goal for what I want to do. I think with these 5 PIs, we can have like 5 studies for each. I think that's something reasonable we can grow into. And I want you guys to be a part of how we do that. Like, I've even asked them, do you think we need an admin to do this? And they all said no. And then I noticed for at least the next day, they all responded to leads faster. So they see that I'm thinking about it. But I don't know why they don't want that. Like, I don't know if they're trying to impress me. Like, hey, no, we don't need to hire someone else. We got this. Pay us more.
I mean, look, man, with every, I mean, that's part of it. And I'm honest in those conversations too. I'm honest in those conversations where I'm like, we can do this or we can do that. What do you guys prefer? But I also think, and especially when you're small, I mean, adding one person can make a significant difference. And that can be, it's a gamble, man.
Good or bad. I've seen that.
Yeah.
And I'm through like a cancer and shut everything down.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like, and maybe there's some hesitancy to be like, all right, well, we know what we got, so let's roll with it. Because I find the same thing. I feel like there's plenty that are like, no, we'll pick up more slack if we need to, and you pay them better or whatever, give them bonuses, take care of your people. But yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I try to like be like, look, we're building this together. You guys are like in on the ground floor, right? Like, that's the idea, is that eventually there's going to be potentially some layers. There's going to be some layers, and you guys are going to be,
and
on top of that.
They could smell when it's not genuine. I think one of the things you and I have going is they can tell we are, as long as we are being genuine. That's on us. And it's easy to sense that in someone else, like when they just say what you want to hear, and it's like becomes a manipulation tactic, as opposed to like what you actually mean. We got Batman in the comments. What the hell?
You got to put your money where your mouth is. It won't last long. Yeah, let me go up first. I want to hit up. Kelvin is always on. So what's up, Kelvin?
Shout out to Kelvin, man.
should
You
come
come
on
in the next SOS. You already know we got you.
Beautiful. What are some unique behavior questions you use to assess a candidate's personality? E.g., which vegetable would you choose to be for a day?
Shit, I don't like vegetables.
All right. See, there you go. It's a good answer. No, I mean, honestly, so, we recently started, well, I say we started, but I had the people who already work here start taking the personality test. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but
Is it the
I'll find
16
it.
personality, like the one with the cartoons that you took?
No. I think it's
Okay.
something. It's called Strength Finders 36 or something like that. I don't know. It's by shit. It's pretty well. I'll think of it. It doesn't matter.
Strengths Finder, yeah.
But
16
frankly,
personality is pretty good too.
Frankly, I mean, a lot of my interviewing process is literally being quiet and letting them talk, because it's really interesting how people will fill a silence, and it tells me a lot, I think, about that person. So Gallups, yeah, I think it is Gallups, Kelvin. Thank you. So it's not always like direct questions. I feel like it's more, for me, it's like, and in fact, I don't like asking directly, because you can study this shit and give people any kind of answer they want to hear, right? Even if it is what vegetable would you choose to be? So I just try to talk to them like I would talk to somebody I'm not interviewing, like get to know them, let them open up, and be quiet. Don't ask too many questions. Let them offer. People will offer up things if you just keep your mouth shut. That's just my. I don't take Nick's what's his pencil strategy is. Yeah,
his pencil thing that he said at SOS. That's it. I mean, look, that just goes to show you site owners are all different, cut from all different kind of backgrounds and affinities and strategies. And at the end of the day, the marketplace will decide. And to your point, Brad, like you get someone like Nelson who only do 5 studies a year and does a great job, and others that do 70 a year and do an equally great job. And there's no right or wrong. It's what that site owner wants to do at the end of the day.
I knew one site, what they did was the person would come in for the interview and they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're an hour late. It was scheduled for this." And they would see how that person would react. Would it be
that seems cruel, man? That seems so
would it be
cruel.
like that person being like, "Oh, no, here's my calendar, here's the documentation, justified, no, this is how," or would it be that person rolling over and say, "Oh no, I must have been on me, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
So that point right there tells you if you've got a strong coordinator or not.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. That I couldn't do that, man. I don't have the heart for that. I can't do that. Keep quiet in an interview either, by the way. So,
I mean, I do. I like it. I like.
Well, Brad has a beard that he could stroke.
Yeah, he can sit there and be like, "Let's think about this."
You need a couple of good awkward silences before you get to know somebody. I think
Shit, that's tough, man. Sarah, it is Myers-Briggs 16 personality. That's the one that we use at our site. It's not a hiring thing, though. I'd give that after we've already hired, just to know how to manage people better.
Yeah, we've used the Gallup, and it's been the same.
What is your strength, Brad?
I believe mine were all very like idea, very like higher level. It breaks it down. I wonder if I have it. I would pull it up and show you what it looks like just for the hell of it. Got some time filler. But yeah, it actually breaks it down real nice, and you start to get an idea of, sort of more like executing personalities versus, sort of ideation, which, it's important. You can't have everybody who's like everyone can be the visionary, like you need people to just do the shit.
You need a good mix of personalities, but you can tell this during an interview without giving them a test if you do, and like the interview's good enough. We usually do 2 interviews, so we get 2 different days to see the same person, and we've weeded people out the next day like, hey, this person totally different person on the second day when the whole team was interviewing them, like, and that's when I usually stay out of it. and I'll do the Brad quiet moment the whole time. I'm just sitting there listening. But yeah, they like a different person. You're like, what happened? It's not the same person.
Here, let's see. I can at least. Oh, sorry, I'm banging around on my microphone.
I'm an ENFP, extrovert, empathetic, feeling, and prospecting.
Prospecting.
Prospecting instead of judge. J is judging, so the alternative of P is J for that one.
So I don't know if you can see that or not. I don't get to see the
we see
StreamYard screen. So that's what the Clifton. It's 34, not 36. I lied. But it gives you your strengths and then sort of your weaknesses at the bottom. Lays out. Not just what I think is really interesting is it kind of lays out. So I guess my number one is adaptability, but
that's a good one to have for research and entrepreneurship.
True. But it talks about why it's good, but also like the blind spots, because you hear like, oh, it's a strength, right? So it must only be good. But some of the times they have like the other side of the coin. So I feel like was a pretty cool part of it. And then what I really liked about these two is that first of all, it's way too many pages, but it kind of breaks them down by domain. So most of mine are in the strategic thinking, even though like my number one's in the relationship building section, and then less in the executing, which I'm a lazy asshole, so that's easy to understand, and a little less in the influencing. So that's what the Clifton will give you. It only took like 30 minutes, I think, to do.
It's not bad.
No, I thought it was really cool. And honestly, I was kind of against the idea of doing it at first. But honestly, I found it pretty enlightening. I thought it was good. Myers-Briggs
is similar. I mean, they use different like attributes, right? But there's like 4 main letters and then a dash with one more letter. So me and one coordinator are like exactly the same. So if I ever need, like, at least in theory, if I need a replacement, I mean, it's her. Now she still's got to do like things to make sure that happens if that's what she wants. But and it doesn't mean the other ones can't. It's the lowest hanging fruit for me. It'd be like, hey, if I'm out, you can do this. Because she enjoys the same things I do.
I like it. You guys see anything in the comments? I'm gonna have to go a little bit early. I got an SIV. Oh yeah, where'd you
regardless of position. Look at Batman. He's got the mask. That's from SOS. I'm in that picture, man. That's me next to Batman.
See the corner of your face.
Shout out to Mitch, man. That was during our podcast. That was a good one.
Yeah, regardless of position, you'll always find people that are content with a specific role and don't want to move into management. Creating a sense of equity and valuing their contributions is huge. Transparency with your company plans and goals and team input help create that sense of equity in what you're doing to help build the company. Yeah, man. Again, everyone's different, right? Like, not everyone's looking to look. Some people want to do their job and go home, and they don't care about anything else. And you have to get used to that as a side owner, because nobody's going to care as much as you do about your company.
You shouldn't.
No, you're right. They absolutely shouldn't.
If they do, it's a problem. That means they want to compete with you at some point.
But I think, but being able to like suss that out early is important, which is done, I think, by being transparent. Again, I think it's like probably one of my single most important values is just being transparent, because a lot comes out just through that process, right? So if you're real with them, like, they'll be real with you, and everybody's on the same page.
Do you think, I know you guys gotta go, do you think that sponsors or which astrology sign do you think makes the best years?
I like this question. I don't know who asked it. I also don't know anything about astrology, but I'm a Gemini, so I'm going to go with that.
My wife's a Gemini too. Do you think that sponsors know about all, like, what sites deal with when it comes to responding to leads and all this stuff? Like, to them, it must be so confusing. Like, why don't they just respond? Do they not want money? Like it's supposed to be a easy answer, right? But I don't think they understand. Like if you had to distill what they don't know, each of you, like what do you think it is in like a sentence or two?
I think that it's underappreciated just how dynamic the role of the coordinator is. Like I know we talk about that they do a lot of stuff, but I think it's still undervalued and underappreciated that they might be dealing with 4 different CRO contacts bothering them on one study, and then 2 sponsors contacts on another, between seeing a patient, between seeing a PI, and helping them sign off on the EDC, and then doing data entry across 4 different systems. And they, a lot of them aren't great when it comes to like customer service, which people have pointed out like in the comments. So again, I think the true breadth of what they have to do still isn't really appreciated. Because it sounds so easy. Like, what? Pick up the phone and call somebody. What are you doing? Why can't you call them within an hour? I don't understand.
I wonder if sometimes, because people who are in sponsor levels, especially in the clinical ops management directorships, it's the whole story of, oh, I was a CRC 10, 15 years ago, so I have an understanding of the site. Sometimes I wonder if their assumptions are based off of outdated experiences that are irrelevant to the current industry. Like they think
we just talked about, like, if you're a CRC, what does that mean? That can mean anything. It could mean that you do everything. It could mean that you do one thing. So even that is not descriptive enough to like paint a picture, right? Like it just varies so much. So it's not specific enough. And do we have more vendors now than ever? Surely. I mean, it's insanity. I mean, that's even within the last probably 3 to 5 years. It feels like there's been a huge jump in, like, I'm sitting through site selections and I'm like, who are half of these people? I've never heard of half of these vendors. And that seems weird.
Would you ever open up an honorary position at your site to invite sponsors to walk the role of a CRC for a week?
They would probably reconsider their career choice after doing that. This industry is a house of cards. They don't know that. I don't think they're ready for that, honestly.
How do you mean? You mean like just barely
everything
together at the bottom?
Yeah, everything, like all these plans and grand ideas and $1 million VC here. Let's implement streamline DCT, blah, blah, blah. It boils down to, will a coordinator do it or not? And if you see how much, number one, how much they get paid.
I was going to say that only works if you make them stay in a 1-bedroom apartment and eat ramen all week and, deal with the real shit. Because, you're right. It is being all held up by these coordinators who maybe making 40 to 50 grand a year, depending on your location, like, which is insane when you stand back and look at.
And are overwhelmed because some of these technologies are so good, like Patient Ace. Like, we have the minimum stream of Patient Ace leads. I told Ironic, not too many. We still can't keep up, man. Like, and it's just the bottleneck is the workforce, and it's not the PI workforce. It's the people doing the work at the site. Newsflash, most PIs don't do the majority of the work. Like, no. I know it's shocking. Sponsors I think they would lose their mind, Dr. Fox. I don't think they would want to, because then they'd have to go back and tell the sponsor, hey, I just went to like one of our best sites, Shutter, best, and this is what I saw.
Yep. They do a lot of that with people trying to understand poverty. Like, have you walk in the shoes of the people who are not making a lot, or, the challenge to try to live like someone on this salary for so long. And it really opens up your eyes to the perspectives of other people. Maybe that's one of my objectives for my clinical research site, is at some point I want to have a position like, you know what, if you want to walk in the shoes of a site, come on over. We'll get you on. We'll train you. You do it for a week, whatever, have some kind of a, crash course thing where you can actually kind of feel what it feels like to be a coordinator. Then maybe you'll make some different decisions when you're at your position.
And you can send the coordinator to go, vacation in Italy, like the executive teams and
There you go.
have them come be a coordinator for a week. It's a good
Yeah,
trade.
have them sit in the C-suite of
Right.
the sponsor. It's just the way it is. I mean, I would, but I think I'd be just reassuring them the whole time that somehow it still gets done. Because I think we would turn like psychologists really quick.
It's a good point, though. I mean, it is. I think the level of chaos is not well understood, and it's not well appreciated because it feels like that a lot of the time. It just feels like chaos, man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, again, I'm going to cut out a little bit early. So I guess Ronick or Dan, either one, give me where can we reach out and learn about Patient Ace? Let's give you guys opportunity to plug a little bit.
Message me. Would give the first couple of sites like the same experience Yuma Clinical Trials is getting. Let me tell you, maybe it's our market. I don't know. Monica says the same thing in a different market. The leads are great. You do have to get on them. It is going to bring you more work. That could be good or bad, but the leads come through and it works. Like we have randomizations to show for it, and we're also wanting to work with sponsors. So if you're a smaller sponsor that are looking for more competitive service than some of the other vendors, reach out to us. Right? And there's plenty of room in this space for multiple good vendors. It's not enough work to go around just for one vendor. So just like we need more sites, I think we need more site-centric vendors when it comes to like truly understanding, built by site owners for site owners. Ronick, any last plug you want to give?
No, I think really at this stage the difference that we make versus probably what's out there right now is just the feedback. We can listen to sites, we can adjust things, and we can. Advertising it's all about feedback and making changes based on actual results. So I think that gives us a big leg up. So we're happy to talk to anybody.
Brad and Fox, you want to be a pilot site? Let us know.
I mean, yeah, I might reach out. We're doing some stuff with.
You'll need that admin.
We're doing some stuff with DAX, Digital Auxilius, which was actually a sponsor of SOS.
Mm-hmm.
But like to your point, like there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space in the industry for different solutions. So
yeah.
I like it. Fox, anything you want to plug?
Not plug, but just an observation. This conversation made me realize something. You start a site and you go in for this main objective, this vision, and then you get the vision, and it's like, holy crap, is this really what I was looking for? Or was I don't want this. I want something different. And how do I adjust to that? It just feels like you constantly go for the grind. You're constantly chasing your tail. But then by the time you get it, you're like, nah, okay.
Was that worth it?
Yeah, was it worth it? So it really makes me think about a lot of things. Like,
yeah,
when you
lately,
get what you want, then what?
For me, it's been just going back to like try to always, as opportunities arise, go back to why. Right? Like at the end of the day, it's like why, and does this satisfy your why? And if it doesn't, then don't do it. Don't feel pressured to do it either.
And your why can change. Your why can change
as
you get older, as you get smarter, as you get richer, as you get poorer, depending on how you manage your business. Those are the possible outcomes.
It's true, but I think, and what I feel a lot like, and maybe Fox pointing to, but like, there's so much to do and there's so much opportunity too. You feel obligated, at least I do. I have in the past, to be like, I got to try all the things. I got to do all of the things. And then you're like, well, shit, that was stupid. I should have just done the things that mattered the most at the end of the day. That's the only thing that I think can help maybe keep you a little bit sane. But I share your sentiment, Dr. Fox. I have to think about that a lot and like ground yourself a little bit, because it's easy, man. It's easy to get yourself sideways.
You got to write it down, man. Make yourself a time capsule. That's the one thing that won't change if you write it down.
I need some new tattoos, so maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Like Memento style.
He's got like a body time capsule over here. Tattoo something that you're only going to look at once a year.
There you go. All right, guys. I got an SIV. So I'm going to jump. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
We'll be back next Tuesday. And probably. Anyways, no promises, but but yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next.